Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at 2 Samuel chapters 13 and 14 in our continuing study of the historical books of the Old Testament. Chapter 13, verse 1. Now it was after this, and you say after what? After the David and Bathsheba incident, where David had committed adultery, and then he had made sure that Uriah the Hittite, the husband of the woman with whom he had committed adultery, that he met with a rather permanent accident. Actually, he made sure that he died at the hands of the enemies, the Ammonites. Well, now it was after this that Absalom, the son of David, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar, and Amnon, the son of David. So you've got Absalom, Tamar, and Amnon, the son of David, loved her. Now, these are brothers and sisters with the same father, but different mothers. So it's a half brother, half sister sort of thing. And Amnon was so frustrated because of his sister Tamar that he made himself ill, for she was a virgin, and it seemed hard to Amnon to do anything to her. So here we have David, and notice his oldest is this Amnon, born through Ahinoam. He's the firstborn. He's the one who is right now, at least, next in line for the throne. Next, you have Absalom and Tamar, and they are from another mother. So David is their father, and so they are brother and sister. And Amnon has become infatuated. The Hebrew text says he loved her, but I think that word love is used in a more general sense there. We're going to find out it's not real love. And then, of course, we've already talked about Bathsheba and Solomon, but at this point in the story, Solomon's just been born. He's maybe still in diapers. He's not really part of this story. Remember, Solomon, when he was born, he had older brothers, ancestors as well, but older brothers. So it didn't look like he was going to be anything following Dad in on the throne. Instead, it looks like maybe he was, as he grows up, it looks like he's going to be in the family business, that is a shepherd. And I think that's where we see him in the Song of Songs. We see him described in shepherd terms. Well, verse 3, but Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother. So these friends are all in the family. Notice that Jesse is the father of David, but David has a number of other brothers, all older than him. And so Jonadab, that's mentioned here, is the cousin. He's the nephew of David and cousin to Amnon. And as cousins do, they talk. And we're told next that Jonadab was a very shrewd man, a ish chacham meod. And that term shrewd, actually, the Hebrew word there he was very wise. But the translators chose not to translate it as wise, even though that's the Hebrew word, because there's a nuance of this term. This is not a good wisdom. This is going to be maybe street smart, but in a negative way, not in a good way. So Jonadab, he's very bright. I can even describe him as being wise in the ways of the world, but not in a godly way. Well, Jonadab then said to his cousin Amnon, he comes up with a plan. Lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. When your father comes to see you, say to him, please let my sister Tamar come and give me some food to eat, and let her prepare the food in my sight that I may see it and eat from her hand. Now, he doesn't really go too much beyond this. I don't know if he's suggesting rape or just suggesting, look, maybe as she cares for you, you two will develop a romance, and it will go in a good way. Well, it doesn't. So here's the story laid out, and I want you to see the symmetry of the way the story is told. We start off where Amnon loves Tamar, or at least lusts after her. Tamar, in response to David's request, where the request is put through David, she comes to the house, and she is taking care of her half brother. And now he orders the servants out, so he gives them some privacy, and he commands her, get in bed with me. Let's have it on. And she says, no, 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 that's not appropriate. And he insists and he pushes, and she pleads. She says, look, if you're in love with me, which is that's what he's saying, then go to dad and ask for marriage, and you're the firstborn. He's going to give you whatever you want. That's not something that was necessarily appropriate, but it was something that was done among the pagans. You know, a brother marrying a sister. The Egyptians did that sort of on a regular basis. So it wasn't completely out of the blue necessarily. And Amnon won't have that. It actually descends now into rape, where he forces himself upon her. And once he has had her, now he commands her to leave. And she says, "Wait, I thought we wanted to this to be the first step of consuming a marriage, and you pushed, and I didn't want to do that, but now you're going to throw me out." And we're not told his state of mind, we're not told his motivations, but he's gotten what he wants, and now he wants out. And so the servants are ordered to take Tamar out. They're called back in, and they take her forcibly from the room, and she leaves the house, and she goes and lets Absalom, her brother, know. And when David hears about all of this, David is, well, gee, that shouldn't have happened, and that's too bad. But he doesn't really do anything. He takes no action. There's no punishment. Amnon is not punished for his actions. And as a result, Absalom now has a complete and utter hatred for Amnon. And so that's chapter 13. Next, and I want you to see that what we've had here is a replaying of what David had done. We're back in chapters 11 and 12. David had lusted for Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah. He had sent for Bathsheba. He had committed adultery with her. Now, there wasn't a rape, at least it's not described that way. It's somewhat consenting. People ask, how consenting can it be? He was king. But we don't read any of that. And then he secretly plots to have Uriah put to death. Well, now that we've had Amnon lusting for Tamar, his half-sister, and Amnon pretends to be sick and then sends for, but in this case, he rapes Tamar. And now we have Absalom, and he's the one who's now plotting to murder his half-brother Amnon. And so we've come full circle in the story. What David has done is now bearing fruit in the lives of his children. So we have Amnon, who did the rape, Absalom, who is plotting revenge and murder, and he's going to plan this out. And in a sense, they're both doing some very similar things. Notice we had in chapter 13 the plot devised for the seductions, and which turned into a rape. I'm not sure if it was intended for that. Where Tamar comes to care for Amnon, and she is raped, and she is in her grief, and she tears her garments, and she goes out, and Absalom gives comfort to Tamar, and David is angry. Not that he wanted it to happen, but he doesn't do anything about it. And Absalom, his hate grows and festers. And now, in the rest of chapter 13, you have Absalom formulating a plot. So again, there's a plot devised. This time, it's Amnon, and this is after a period of 2 years, where Absalom has been hating, but he has been he's been keeping it secret. Is not aware. He's plotting and planning on getting even, on taking revenge. And so he goes to his father and requests, "Can Amnon come? We're having a sheep shearing celebration ceremony. Can he come? And you're invited too, Dad." And David gives permission for Amnon to go, but declines to go himself. Now, I don't think he's aware of what's going on, but he's getting on in years, and he's not going to attend. And so at the appointed time, this is carefully crafted, Amnon is murdered. And now David hears about the death of his son, and David's the one who goes into grief. He tears his garments. Remember, Tamar had torn her garments. And we don't read that David had done that on her behalf. What's wrong with this picture? And now Jonadab, remember Jonadab that had come up with the original plan. Now he's the one who is there giving comfort to his father David. It's interesting how he's the beginning and at the end of the cycle. And Absalom is forced to flee. After all, he's a murderer. He murdered his own brother. And he's going to leave the country. And David now is the one who goes into mourning. And so Absalom fled and went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, the king of Geshur. That's modern day, we call that the Golan Heights today. And David mourned for his son every day. You say, which son? Well, we're not told. Is he mourning for his son Amnon? Is he mourning for Absalom? Is he mourning for both? I'm not sure. I think it's for the son who had been killed. David, can I say it this way? I think David maybe is holding a grudge. So Absalom had fled and was gone to Geshur and was there for 3 years. So we've had 2 years of planning revenge, and now 3 years where he is in isolation. He's basically been banished. I mean, not by decree, but he has gone there because he's a murderer. We're now struck by the contrast between David and Absalom. David had murdered Uriah to hide his sin. Absalom had murdered Amnon out of revenge. In both cases, there was a plot, there was planning. This is premeditated murder in both cases. In the case of David, Nathan comes and tells a story about an injustice that had taken place. Doesn't tell him it's a parable. Tells him, hey, something's happened in your kingdom. A rich man has killed the lamb of a poor man, and then when that poor man complained, the poor man himself was murdered. And remember how David had said, that man ought to die, and Nathan had said, you are the man. Well, here in the case of Absalom, again, a story comes to David. This time it's from a wise widow who was sent by Joab to tell a story, and the story, and she doesn't say this is a parable, this is a story. She's presenting it as though it's true, just like Nathan had done, where her son, according to the story, murders his brother and is now arrested and is to be killed, which means that she, as the mother, she has lost one son to murder, and she's going to lose the other son to the penalty of the murder. She's going to be completely bereft. And the point, as David hears the story, is that he's in the same boat, that he has lost one son to murder and he has lost the other one to being a refugee, banished from the land, that is Absalom. And so he hears the story, and now he's going to call, just like David had heard the story, and the story brought David to repentance. Now David hears the story, and the story brings Absalom back home. But it's not quite the same thing. Notice chapter 14, verse 23. So Joab arose at the orders of David and went to Geshur and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. However, here's the difference. The king said, let him turn to his own house and let him not see my face. Why? Because David has not forgiven him. And so Absalom turned to his own house and did not see the king's face. Remember the story of the prodigal son who goes out and disrespects the father and goes out and blows the inheritance and comes back? And the father doesn't say, well, you can come back, but don't come into the house. You can come back, but I don't want to see your face. No, the father there had gone out and met his son and embraced him and brought him in. But David doesn't do that. David takes a very different turn. There's still no reconciliation. And so this is a return without reconciliation. And now as the story continues, they're all in the land, David, Joab, Absalom, and Absalom's back home, but not permitted into David's presence. And so he reaches out to Joab. After all, Joab had arranged that wise woman, to sort of bring things back together. And he sends for Joab, and Joab rebuffs him. Joab doesn't answer his phone calls, doesn't want to have anything to do with him. And so Absalom resorts to extreme measures to get attention from Joab. Absalom burns Joab's fields, and Joab, that gets his attention. Joab comes, what was that all about? And Absalom, says, well, you wouldn't return my phone calls, you wouldn't speak to me. We need to make this happen where I get to come back into the presence of the king. And so Joab intercedes for Absalom, and now David and Absalom are reconciled, but it's on the outside, not on the inside. There still remains something there, at least on the part of Absalom. Now, I don't want to speak for David's heart, because I think remember, David was a man after God's own heart. That didn't mean he did everything right, but it means that when he was called on it, he would repent. But Absalom, we never read that he's a man after God's own heart. And so we have David and Absalom, and the problem is of an incomplete reconciliation. Not necessarily on David's part, although it looks like it started off that way, but on Absalom's part, he's still holding the grudge. He's still making plans. In fact, he's out to he can no longer get Amnon. He wants to take out his own father. And I'm not saying David did everything right, he didn't, but there's been a lack of forgiveness. Remember how Jesus taught his disciples to pray? Jesus said, Lord, forgive us our debts. Remember the rest of that? As we forgive our debtors. And the point is that forgiven people forgive. If you really caught onto the forgiveness that Jesus gives, if you have that new birth, then that turns you into a forgiving person. And if you've been unable to forgive, then go back to the cross and look to see how much you have been forgiven. Because it might be that if you can't forgive somebody else, that you haven't really connected with that forgiveness that is offered to you.